Hello, I'm Kaz Graham and this is the Farming Today podcast. In this edition, livestock welfare at risk and businesses thousands of pounds out of pocket.
Well, I think Calmac know that they've got an ageing fleet and it should have been addressed a long time ago.
How the major disruption to Scotland's ferry services is taking its toll on a small Hebridean island. First though, now most of us take it for granted, but farmers have always got excited about soil. Good soil makes the difference between a bumper crop and slim pickings. And in this week's Rare Earth here on Radio 4, Tom Heap and Helen Chesky are investigating the joy of soil. Well, we couldn't resist stealing a sneak preview. We're about to hear from Dr. Jack Hannam from the University of Greenwich, Duncan Farrington, a farmer, and first Dr. Simon Jeffrey from Harper Adams University.
If you can take a big handful of soil, there'll be more bacterial cells in that handful of soil than there are humans on planet Earth. If you had the patience of a saint and went through to pull out all those bits of fungi, you'd find something between 50 and 100 kilometres of these strands of fungi. So it's absolutely teeming with life.
Duncan, you have a box on the table. It's got something in it.
It's a sod of soil that I dug from one of our fields last night.
Pass it over then. Let's have a look.
Jack was desperate to get her fingers on it. You took it away from us.
So what we have here, the technical term, we're in Northamptonshire and our soil type is a chalky boulder clay. Now what that means, it's a high clay content with a lot of chalk in it. It's actually,
I have to tell the audience what just happened, which is that Jack picked up a bit of soil and held it out to Simon, who sort of gave a knowing nod, and it was exactly like some kind of gourmet expert in a restaurant approving of the starter.
It's a fungal hyphae that's in there. So these strands you can see against the darkness of the earth, these white strands in the soil. There's one perfectly displayed there, which we talked about earlier.
Jack extracted it beautifully.
Yeah.
You can see the pore space. You can see that's a macropore generated by organisms that have been burrowing through the soil.
So that's a bigger hole, basically, a macro
basically,
hole.
yes.
It's sort of the width of a knitting needle or something like that.
Yeah, and when you put it apart, you can see the strands that we're talking about. You can see that there's life there. You can see the aggregate structure of the soil.
I'm interested in this idea of what is good soil, and clearly it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. How do we know when we're getting it right, Jack?
It smells really good. You think about those nice earthy smells, not those sort of sulphurous, eggy smells when the soil is waterlogged. And you can see the pore space. You can touch it, it breaks apart easily. And then there's lots of things we can do scientifically to measure things in the soil. How acid or alkaline is it? How much carbon it is? We can measure the biodiversity in there as well. We can scan that pore space to understand how much pore space there is.
But it's presumably horses for courses as well, because, a very fertile soil would be great maybe for farming or certain times of wildlife. But I know, for instance, where I got, trying to get wildflowers in my garden, you want it to be very poor soil in nutritional terms.
Exactly. It's about what you want to do with that soil. And a bit like individuals, the soil is like an individual. We're good at certain things and not so good at others.
And you can hear more on the joy of soil in Rare Earth tomorrow lunchtime, just after 12 here on BBC Radio 4. There are 60 native breeds of sheep in the UK, and DEFRA says that 40 of those breeds are officially at risk, with fewer than 6,000 breeding ewes. That figures on their newly published UK native breed support list. Farmers who keep rare breed sheep often sell their meat for a premium at farmers' markets or in box schemes. But the decline in the number of small abattoirs able to process small batches of carcasses means that the numbers just don't add up for some of those farmers now. That's been the case for Bob Felton, who farms on the edge of Ashdown Forest in Sussex, as he's been telling our reporter Theo White.
So, Bob, it's an absolutely beautiful place. We're looking over a valley in Sussex. I see a few of your very young lambs with their mums.
We've got 230 ewes, of which we lamb 60 roughly in January, early February.
That's quite early, isn't it, to be lambing?
Yes, the early lammers are predominantly polled Dorsets, few Charolais, and we're moving on to Cheviot mules, because they're a very hardy breed.
You used to farm some rare breeds, is that right?
Yes, we've still got a few Llanwenogs left. They are a bit tricky from our point of view. The carcasses are quite small. They're very good for the boxed market.
Boxed is selling direct to customers.
We just sell it by word of mouth and at local adverts. But the only problem is, of course, is the abattoirs. we're struggling with local abattoirs.
Tell me about that. What's the problem?
Well, we always used to use one at Heathfield, which is 12 miles away. That closed. We now use one at Henfield, that's about 18 miles from here, which is very good, but they're so busy, you have to book in months in advance.
What's the effect that has on your business?
It just makes it more difficult. Yeah, ideally we'd sell loads of lamb in lamb boxes. By the time you've taken it to Henfield or whatever, brought it back, marketed it, and there is only the two of us here. So we sort of limit to how much we do.
Your land is owned, you're a tenant of the Countryside Regeneration Trust. Tell me about that charity.
The charity was formed about 30 years ago by a gentleman called Robin Page. They had quite a lot of ground left to them because his ideals suited a lot of people's idea of restoring the countryside to what it had been. As you've heard, we have a wonderful amount of wild birds around here. We have a lot of woodland and we manage the wood. I entered the farm into a higher level stewardship, so we're on wildflower meadows, low input grassland. We rotate the grazing. It's quite easy here. We don't need a lot of temporary fences because the fields are all very small anyhow. But we also, this is how we've maintained and improved the wildflower meadows. We shut them up in May, end of April, beginning of May, and take a late cut of hay, having allowed everything to seed before we cut it. And that's really the crucial part of it. That allows the wild plant to regenerate. We're devoted to the farm, I think, have been all our lives.
Bob Felton with Theo White. There's concern that animal welfare may be at risk on some Scottish islands because of widespread disruption to ferry services. 8 ferries serving islands on the west coast of Scotland were out of service earlier this week, with Calmac, Caledonian MacBrayne, the government-owned company that runs them, describing the situation as critical, with almost every island affected. NFU Scotland says there's a risk that vital supplies like feed and fertiliser won't arrive on crofts and farms when they're needed most. Well, we thought we'd take a look at how one island is being affected by this ferry crisis, the Isle of Barra. It's at the southernmost end of the Outer Hebrides, has stunning beaches, crofting and fishing businesses, a population of around 1,200 people, and it relies on its ferries. Donald Joseph is a crofter and haulier. He's based on Barra and his lorry delivers fodder for livestock there. And I asked him how the ferry services are affected.
Oh, it's near impossible at the moment. We don't have a ferry. Now we've been sent up to Uig Skye, which is a 3.5-hour, 4-hour journey to another island north of us. And then you've got to go from there to the central belt of wherever you're going, which is another, in a truck, it's 7 hours. And you need 2 drivers because your working time directive does not allow you to do that. It's taking us twice as long to get there and double the cost. And especially just now with fuel prices going through the roof. So it's having huge implications on businesses on the island and on crofters that are running out of foodstuffs. And we've had a bad winter with weather anyway. And on top of what's happening, it'll put crofters out of business.
I know that you bring hay onto the island. Tell me, how are current feedstocks? Is there enough hay to keep crofters going?
Not really. No, people are running out of hay. And it's the time of year when animals are calving and you're going through a lot more fodder to keep them going. And the weather has been atrocious. And that doesn't help matters. We just can't get onto the island. And at costing an extra 80% to what it should be. And people just can't afford to pay that.
And have you been in touch with Calmac? What do they say?
You get the usual from Calmac, we're doing your best, but their best is not good enough. No, we need a ferry of our own.
You know, NFU Scotland has raised concerns that this could turn into an animal welfare situation. I know that you're a crofter as well. Do you think that is possible? Is that going to happen?
Oh, that could very well happen if it's not rectified sooner rather than later. We're heavily dependent on getting fodder onto the island, and a lot of that fodder comes from Stirling. But it's the cost implication now on trying to get it onto the island. Shops, They're struggling to get vital supplies onto the island. Medical supplies are struggling to get onto the island. It's affecting everyone living on the island one way or another.
That's Donald Joseph. Christina McNeil is General Manager of Barra Atlantic, a fish and shellfish processing company on the northeast of Barra.
Oh, the effects have been massive because we've had to do a longer detour because we like to sell product as fresh, and we can't get to the fresh markets in time because of the extra time that's been added on. Also with our drivers, they've got to stop, to have their scheduled breaks and things like that. So it's huge, it really is. When we sell produce into France and all that, they're buying for the quality. If we can't get it to the market when it's at its freshest, our customers will refuse it, and it costs us more to destroy those goods in France than what it does to take it back to the UK. And not only that, we have got customers who rely on us, and they've also got clients who are relying on them. So it's a domino effect. If we're not supplying our customer with their product for their customers, they get angry at us and then they look to more reliable producers.
And is there anything that you can do if shipments are delayed?
Not really, no. Not if your market is the fresh market, well then no, not really. We're fortunate in that we can freeze produce because we've got a frozen market as well, but your price is completely different. You don't command the same high price for frozen.
As a business person, how do you view this whole situation?
No, it's I don't want to say disastrous because that's a bit too extreme, but it is having an impact on us hugely in the extra costs. So putting this pressure on us as well to sustain that, we won't be able to sustain it for a long time, that's for sure. And nobody else is going to pick up the costs. I mean, at the moment, the government are saying that they're ready to help us, with those costs. But when? I mean, if we're paying these extra costs or losing out money today, they're not going to put that into our bank tomorrow to compensate us. It'll take a long time for us to get that back. And in that time, what do we do?
And in real terms, what does that mean? Might you have to lose staff?
Well, I don't want to think like that, but obviously, yeah, if we can't afford to keep our staff on, we would have to let staff go. I mean, every business is the exact same.
How much confidence do you have that this is going to be resolved fairly soon?
Oh, I don't, sadly. But given the fact that there's 8 vessels out of commission at the moment, and it's not just impacting Barra, it's a lot of other islands, which is sad. So what island do you prioritise first? Because each and every one has got their own, individual needs and extra costs put onto them.
Christina, it sounds just a hugely frustrating situation.
Oh, it is, because it's not as if that we're getting time to adjust to this. If we had a month's notice, we might have tried to make other sort of plans. Whether we could have done those other plans or not, I don't think so, if I'm honest. But because it's so unpredictable, if we could plan for these sort of things, it would lessen the impact, but we can't.
And do you think they could have given you more notice? Because, Calmac knew that there were going to be some vessels out of service because they were being maintained, weren't they?
Yes, yeah. Well, I think Calmac know that they've got an ageing fleet and they need to address that, and it should have been addressed a long, long time ago. And prevention is better than cure. So if they've prevented all this happening, we wouldn't be in the position today.
That's Christina McNeil on Barra. Well, we approached Calmac Ferries and they told us that they're working towards restoring a level of normality to services to the Outer Hebrides by the middle of next week. And Scotland's Transport Secretary, Fiona Hislop, told us that their priority is to ensure minimum disruption and to restore services as quickly as possible. And she also advises travellers in the coming days to check with their operators to understand any impacts. And that's all from us for today. I'm Kaz Graham. The producer is Rebecca Rooney, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.